Hello, everybody. Good morning. All right. Just gonna pull some stuff up here on my end. Analia, I'm gonna look for your email here. Okay. All right. So Analia had a question about spacing text and dates. I'm gonna see if I can figure this out because it's not something that I normally do for sure. So we're gonna try it and see what happens. I will start sharing here. Let's make sure I've got the right stuff open. Hold on just a second. Okay. Screen share. All right. Are you able to see my screen? Chat open. There we go. Okay. So Analia was asking about spacing text. She said, as an example, doing a 1900 to a 1980. Now, Analia, you said that when you break it apart, you have 9 pieces. I'm not sure how you're going to break it apart or how exactly you're typing the text to begin with. But in this example, if I type in 1900 dash 1980, that's just a single dash. This one up here was a double dash. So it gave me the stylized version. But if I come up to object and say break apart, then what it should do is it should break it up into words. So we've got 1900, we've got the dash, and then we've got the 1980. So that's the way that it should work. If it's not working that way, let me know, but that's how it's supposed to work. I have noticed though that if I use my MD Roman and do a double dash like this, so that gives me the stylized dash. If I go up and break that one apart, then it will silence my phone here real quick. Then it will, for some reason, I'm not sure why, but it puts the dash with the 1900. So normally, if I'm going to be breaking things apart to space them, I'm going to do the dash separate probably. So you can break your text up into the 3 different pieces. And then let's see, text spacing for width. You said I select my 2 dates with the dash. I want a width of 3 inches for the first date, a dash, and 3 inches for the second date with 2 inches of space on either side of the dash. So if I wanted this to be exactly 3, I mean, it's pretty close already to 3 inches, but if I want it to be exactly 3, that's when you're coming up and using text spacing for width here. And typing in a 3, then hitting apply, that should make it exactly 3 inches. And if I did the same thing for this one, it should make it exactly 3 inches. So then we've got this dash, right? And depending on the dash style I want, if I want that one, or if I do 2 dashes and a space to get the the stylized version. Now you want to put 2 inches of space between these. So that's when I grab all 3 of these. I'm just holding shift to do that. And then I would use the spacing section of the panels and spacing docker. And we're just going to distribute horizontally instead of vertically. And we'll do 2 inches and hit apply. That's going to put 2 inches of space between here and here and there and there. I didn't quite draw it exact, but you get the picture here that it's 2 inches of space there. So that's how I would do it. I don't really have a tool set to do that automatically because it's just not something that I ever do. So if you want exact numbers like that, that's a mixture of using text spacing per width and the distribute horizontal on the spacing section of the Docker. Does that do what you were hoping for, Analia? Yeah, okay. And then you said I would like to have the text spacing per width icon in my toolbox. If you want this text spacing per width icon over here, which is where the toolbox is, it's pretty simple. Mistakes, but okay, I'll go back to the dash. So depending on the font that you have, on my MD Roman font, if I type in 1900 and then 2 dashes and then 1980, hold on one second, I gotta let my dog in. Yeah. If I do 1900 and then 2 dashes, which gives me that stylized dash, and then 1980, if I go to break it up with Control K, that stylized dash for some reason gets put with the 1900. I'm not sure why it does that, but to get around that, what I do is instead of doing the stylized dash to begin with, I'll just do a regular dash. Break that apart, and then I would take this one and switch it to a stylized dash. So you can get those by doing dash, 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 or dash, dash, and then a space bar, depending on the length that you want with the MD Roman font. With the MLC fonts, if you have those ones, so if I did MLC modern, I don't know, just any one of these fonts, their dashes for stylized ones are different. You do like a bracket or a less than symbol, and then dashes, and then a greater than symbol in order to do it. So I've noticed when I use the MLC fonts, it works fine. If I hit Control K to break it apart, then those break apart just the way that they are. And if you know that you want both of these dates to be 3, you should be able to select both of them at the same time and run text spacing per width and hit apply, and it'll do both of them at the same time. And then you're just going to grab all of those and hit apply over here with your 2-inch horizontal. So that's, I mean, if I wanted to make sure that I had exactly, I don't know why that, it's pretty close. It's not exact though. I wonder what's going on there. I wonder if it has to do with the, it's pretty close. I'm gonna call that good enough. It's pretty close. Let's see if I switch it to 4 inches. That's exactly 4. Let's go back to 3. Yeah. Slightly off. I'm not sure why, but that's close enough in my book. Anyway, so that's how I would do it, is a mixture of text spacing per width and the spacing section of the Docker over here. And I don't know if this is what you meant, but you said you wanted to have the text spacing per width icon in your toolbox. If you don't have it up, you should have it up here on the bar. If you don't see it up here on the bar, it's possible that perhaps your toolbar is getting cut off. So if the screen is small, or if your resolution isn't large enough, it could end up that you're getting cut off there. In which case, if you right click on a blank section of the toolbar, go to customize and switch to either medium or small buttons. It'll make those smaller so that you'll be able to see them all. Or if you really wanted it over here in the toolbox, you can just hold Control and Alt at the same time and click and drag, and then you can put it wherever you want. So if you wanted it down here, then it's going to be over there. I don't really want it there, so I'm going to hold Alt and click and drag off and just onto this blank section, and that way it will disappear. Any questions on that, or anything that you need me to explain better? It's good. Okay. Give me just a second. We had some. Brandy was going to join. I don't see him on, so I'm just going to email real quick to make sure that they're coming on. And okay, so the next thing is Brandy and her designer have been working on converting their artwork from their previous CAD program, and wanted to know if it's the way that they're doing it is the best way to get everything converted over. And so I'm going to look at these designs and talk a little bit about them, because I think they're good examples of some different things here. So I'm going to open up one of their designs. You can see it here. Over on the right, if we go to the objects docker, there are two, you can see it's called object 1 and object 2. But what these are layers. And then if we click on this or this, you'll see the objects inside those layers. Most of the time, when it comes to objects and stacking order and that sort of stuff, I find it more complicated than not to have layers. I don't normally use layers in our workflow. So if I wanted to combine all these layers into a single layer, we've got an option up here called objects 2 layers. And my guess is that that was probably used because it has them named object 1 and object 2. But if we wanted to undo that and merge all the layers, what you do is you hold Control and click on this button, and that will then merge them all to a single layer. So now they're all on layer 1. Objects, because they can be stacked on top of each other, is pretty much layers anyway, as far as the way that they work and you interact with them. And so I honestly just don't use layers much in what we're doing, unless I have to send it out to a different program for laser etching or something of that case, in that case, because in order to get it out to a different program, it does need to have multiple layers to stay layered. But that's, maybe a notes layer might be something that I would do too. So if I had created a new layer like this and named it notes, I can have notes like this. I don't know, something like this. Again, it's not something that I would normally do in my workflow. But let's just say we did something like that, right? So maybe I would do something like that and have it on a notes layer, because then what you can do is you can always just hide the notes layer and not see that, or you can easily delete the layer, or you can tell it to not be printable, or you can lock that layer. So you can work on things on a layer basis, but again, I find it just more complicated than anything when it comes to our workflow. So I usually don't use layers. So I would merge all those layers and not have it layered. And then, not to say that this is bad, because it's not by any means, but if it were me, I would actually break these corner pieces up apart from the rest of the design. So right now, if we come into here, we'll see that, this frosted section is combined with everything else, and then we've got this piece. So you can break it up if you want to. On a node level, you can come in here and break these nodes up. And what that's doing is it's just separating the nodes so that there are 2 nodes at those locations instead of 1. So if we break it up like that, and I'm just going to wireframe so that I can do the same thing here. So this is one way of doing it, is breaking it up. Even though I'm breaking it apart and breaking those nodes apart, it's still combined together. And so you don't really notice anything different until you go up to object and now break the curve apart. Because I've broken the curve apart, now I've got that piece separated from the rest. And I would need to do the same thing for these inside pieces. Just go up and say break curve apart. And that way I've got this piece that is now separated from the rest. It's got holes in it though. So what I would want to do normally is combine it together. And then I would probably just use the join curves Docker and do a Bezier curve with, I don't know, a pretty large gap tolerance, and just hit apply. And let's see if that works. So what it's doing is it's now joining those pieces back together, but it's joining them separate from these lines that we broke them apart from. Okay. Now what we would need to do is we'd need to join these together. I don't really want to use a Bezier curve for that, and I need much larger gap tolerance because, let's say 10 inches. I don't want it to curve exactly. I would rather do an extend on this one. So if I just hit extend and apply, then that's going to move that line and that line up until they intersect and meet with each other. So I would do the same thing for these ones and the same thing for these ones. And I'm just grabbing the nodes so that I can tell it which ones I want to extend to each other. So now they've extended. And we've got this, which is now behind the panel. So I would move it to the front. I usually use shift page up for that. And then I would use fill grayscale to fill it. So it's not going to look any different than the one on the right, other than it has been pulled apart. So if I wanted to change this design at all, or if I needed to move these, for spacing, now I'm able to move them around. Or if I wanted to bring it down here, for instance, instead of having it in the corner, you can do that kind of stuff because we've broken it apart from the panel itself. So not saying that it's bad to have these already welded together the way that they are. From a production standpoint, it's nice because you don't have to do anything. It's already ready to go. So if you use this same design over and over and over and over without making any changes, then it's great to have the already made template where it's all combined together. But if you are making any sort of changes at all, then I find it best to break things up. Any questions on that? Okay, so the next one, yeah, so you break apart the node, because that's the first thing that you do is you break apart your node. So if we do it over on this side, this curve, because we had already broken it apart, these are all individual pieces. We don't need to break any nodes there because they're already separated from everything else. But if we want to separate this and maintain this little line here, that's when you need to break it apart. So you break it apart at the node, and that's going to separate that single node into two nodes, but it's not making these two lines now separated from each other until you break apart that curve. So as soon as you break apart the curve, then this can be moved separately from this piece. So we broke it at the nodes, and then we broke the entire curve up so that we can get to these this portion of it individually. And the reason that I broke it here is because I want to maintain that that outline there. So that's why I'm breaking it up right here where the straight line and the you know, that part of the design meet up. And I don't need to break it up again until I get back over to this side where they meet up again. So I'll break that apart and break that apart. There are definitely different ways of going about it. I mean, if the reason that I went this way is because it lets you maintain the lines that you already have. But if you didn't really care about those lines, if we wanted to, what we could do is we could just draw a new rectangle. So let's just say I draw a new rectangle from here to there. Okay. Since I've got my new rectangle created, I don't really need this anymore. So I could just click on those segments and delete the segments. And that's another way of going about it, is just to delete segments, and then I'd have to go back and delete all of these that I don't need. And in this case, what I would be doing is deleting the segments that I don't need, and then just rebuilding the panel. But because the panel is pretty straight, it's pretty easy to get that panel to join back together again. That's why I broke it up this way. It's just because I think it's probably just as easy to do this than anything else. So I'm breaking it up at the node level, and then I will break it up at the curve level and break these curves apart from each other. And now that I've done that, I've got these pieces here, and I can join those together. And I can do them one at a time, or if I grab all the nodes. This might join together. If I grab these, it might join together. No, it didn't. See, it just kind of made that. So that's not really the look that I would want to go for, right? So that's, again, why I would want to keep this section here, so that I can make sure that those join together the right way. And once they're joined, technically I don't really need these anymore. I could delete those nodes. Those are just extra nodes. If I wanted to clean up this design, I really don't need those, so I can get rid of them. But then that leaves us with these ones. And if I tried to extend this all at the same time, so if I grabbed it like this and went to extend and hit apply, I doubt that it's going to work the way that I would expect it to. It's going to extend to the closest open area. So it has extended and closed in here. That's what it's done. And that's not what I want it to do. And so that's why I had to grab these nodes individually, so that I'm telling it to join or extend this one and that one to each other. If I don't grab the nodes that I want to do, it's going to do its best guess as to which ones ought to be joined together. And it's going to find the closest, the next closest node and join to that one. So that's why I was grabbing those nodes in order to do my extend. So I've got all those, just hit F to fill grayscale, which is that option there. And now I've got it so that these are all separated out. So when it comes to node editing or curve, when it comes to node editing, you'll notice that I've got a little bit of a blue outline. Hopefully you can see that to my object. And because this object here is separated from this object here, they're two different objects. If I had this one selected first and I was editing it, if I hold shift to click on another one, one of them will be red and one of them will be blue because you've got two different objects selected. And so we've got two different paths. We've got a blue one and a red one. And so that's the difference. Why there is red and blue is because there's the main one, which I selected first, and then the secondary one that I selected next. Once I joined them together, they became the same curve, and so they would have, been blue together. But before I had, if we go back up into this, it was this section here. There was a blue one and a red one because there were two different objects. But yeah, that's what the colors mean, is that you've got multiple objects with being selected at the same time. Give me just a second here. Randy and Jay said they're in the meeting, but they're not in this meeting. So, seeing if maybe they joined a different one. Okay. All right. Derek, did you have any questions on anything that you've been working on that you need to go over? I'm going to get back to these designs here in just a little bit, but I wanted to, since you're on, what kind of stuff did you need to cover? And I don't know if you've got a microphone or not, but if you have a microphone and want to unmute yourself and talk, that's great as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the duplicate remover. It has not been working the way I'd like to.
Okay.
It actually gives me an error many times. And I was wondering if you could expand on the duplicate remover in the future, because I've had a number of items that when the vector art is used, there are super teeny tiny loops that most of the time are too small to even see. You have to zoom in very, very far to find them and cut them out. I was wondering if you could develop the duplicate remover to cut off those super tiny loops,
Okay,
because they are real trouble when you try to contour, because it will block off a portion of the object and you will not be able to continue the contour line. For some reason, it interrupts the contour.
do you happen to have a file or an example of one that is doing that to you?
Um,
If not,
last time I did it, I corrected the problem.
and then
I would say just draw some shape, but somewhere in there, draw a couple super teeny tiny overlapping loops. This happens a lot when you try to take something from the clip art from MemorialDESIGNER, or I guess you could even take a black and white image and just convert it into vector. And of course, Corel Draw will pick out certain details that I guess are insignificantly small, but it'll still pick it up and it'll convert it into a super tiny loop.
okay. So there's a couple different things to look at. One is if you hit the question mark on your MemorialDESIGNER toolbar, what version are you running? Do you know?
Let me look.
Should give a version number right here.
1.3751.
Okay, so in that version, and this is the way that the remove duplicates used to work, and it is currently working in the version that you're running.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea behind it is that it wanted to, make sure that there weren't any sort of duplicated pieces at all. And so if there was, I'm just going to grab a section here and copy and paste it. So this piece here has now been duplicated over the top of this one. Okay.
Yes.
And so the way that it worked is it would go and it would take everything in your design and it would grab basically the whole design and go up to object, and it would break apart. I don't know why it's not working there. It would break apart at the node level. And so it's breaking every curve up at the nodes. And then just like we were showing before, it would then break it up again, so that each of these now become their own object. Okay. By doing that, it then was looking for pieces that were exactly the same size that were overlapping. So in this case, it would find this piece and it would delete one of those overlapping pieces because it was exactly the same. The downside, the problem that we ran into with using that is that it would often, so it would do the break apart first, okay? And if you had a very complicated design, I mean, that could break apart into thousands and thousands of objects because of all the nodes. And then after it did that, then it would try to do a join in order to get all of those nodes back together. And that's where the problem came for the most part, is that it would join things that were really close to each other, perhaps. And that's, I think, where the problem is, causing those little loops, is just because there's, such a small thing broken apart. And then when it tried to join it back together, that's creating that little loop for you. So to answer your question on the way that it works right now in the version that you've got, I think it is problematic. And so we've been working on changing that and not having it do the break apart anymore. So instead, the new code, what it will do is just look for exact duplicates, not break anything apart. And if it does find things that are broken apart, then it will, or if it does find things that are overlapping. So I'm going to come back here and back up just a little bit. Right there. Okay, so if I've got an overlapping object and I remove duplicates, it's going to tell me now how many duplicates that it found. It didn't find any duplicates because this piece is actually not an exact duplicate of anything else. But what it did find was an overlapping object. And so it turned the overlapping object, the thing that was touching the other object, blue. And if I do it again, it will kind of work in an opposite direction, where it's now going to find the single piece instead of that combined loop. So again, it's not finding any duplicates, but it is finding an overlap. And because this one is an open curve, it's giving me these endpoints so that I can better see where that curve begins and ends. And I think that this is going to work out better than it's trying to break everything apart and then recombine it, because I think that's where the problem was coming from, is that it was rejoining things, not necessarily the way that we want them, since it has to, join to, it's got to choose basically what it's joining to. So I can get you this new code if you want to, see if that helps and makes it better as far as the removing duplicates goes. The other portion of that, and if you do have a design that's got small, tiny little pieces, there is, I'm just going to draw in a couple tiny little pieces here. Okay. There is a tool that I use just kind of in the background, or it's not necessarily an official tool, but if you go to tools and scripts and then you run script inside the MemorialDESIGNER GMS file, there's going to be one called test modules and then select small. So we haven't officially created a button or anything with this tool, but if you run that, what it does is it goes and finds anything that's smaller than 0.09 inches and then deletes it. So if I, run that, it'll delete anything that's really small. It didn't delete anything in this case because when I drew this, my little pieces aren't really all that little. They're larger than that 0.09. So if I made them teeny tiny like this, that's smaller than 0.09. So if I run it again, scripts, run script, and MemorialDESIGNER, and then test modules, select small. It will, or it should, delete that one that I had just created. If I undo, then it will select those ones that had been deleted to show me.
Was that part of the same object, or was that a separate object?
It was separate. It was something that I just drew from scratch. Yeah, it's not going to delete anything that's part of your object because it's combined to something larger. So if there were, really small pieces, sections of this, they would need to be broken up and broken apart, because then these, if we break these all apart, then these little teeny tiny pieces here, they're smaller than that. Then it would find those and delete them. Not that I would want to do that in this case, because now I've created a gap in my design. But for the files that you've currently got, that you've got those little issues, I think select small is probably something that could help you find all of those. You just need to make sure that it's broken apart first, so that it can find them individually as opposed to connected to anything else. But yeah, let's get you the new code so that you can try the new way remove duplicates works and see if that would work better for you. When you're using remove duplicates, is that because you are on purpose making multiple objects, or you're bringing in files from somewhere else that has duplicated objects, or what's your workflow there on why you're using remove duplicates? I'm just curious.
Well, sometimes I will take an image that is a vector image, convert it into a line drawing,
Okay.
and sometimes CorelDRAW, many times CorelDRAW will decide to do some, I guess you'd say, detail work with it. And it's very unconventional what it decides to do. And it'll create these small loops in the pathway where it's trying to put almost everything on a single path, and then it'll create a loop. And the problem is when I try to turn that into a contoured area, there's going to be numerous loops around it. And if I hit the remove duplicates, I get an error message.
Okay. Yeah, next time
And
that happens, if you can send me the file so I can take a look at it and see what it's doing. Then I can probably help you out a little bit better on how you're doing it. Are you using auto trace? Are you using quick trace or something in order to create that vector to begin with off of a bitmap? Or you said
yes,
when you
yes.
do that, are you using just a black and white image, or does it have grayscales in it?
No, I've converted it all to black and white if it wasn't done already.
Okay. Yeah, next time you do it, send me the file that you're working with, and maybe we can go over your steps and see, if there's something else we can do. Annalia was asking how to find that the remove small button. If you want to use it a lot, I would suggest actually making a button or a shortcut key for it. So I'll show you both ways of doing that. If you want to just run it once, you can go to Tools, Scripts, Run Script. And in older versions of CorelDRAW, instead of being scripts, it used to be called macros. But anyway, in 2021, you go to Tools, Scripts, Run Script, and then that will pop up a dialog box of macros. You're going to look for macros in, and depending on how many sets of macros you have to find the one that is MemorialDESIGNER. It's just the one that's MD, and then MemorialDESIGNER _ and then the version number. Not this one. This one here is from the Docker, so we're not going to use that one. We're going to use this one that's called MD. So we'll click on that, and then there's a bunch of these are the different tools that can be run. Some of these have buttons and quick keys and that sort of stuff to them, but not all of them. And so that's where, especially the test modules one, doesn't have a button already. So if I click on test modules and then .select small, that is the one that I want to run, and then I would run it. If I wanted to do that a whole bunch of times, or use it all the time, then what I would do is create a button for it. So I'd go to Tools, Options, and then Customization, I think it is. And it always changes. Yeah, Customization, and then Commands. And then under Commands, if we go to File, and for some reason in 2021, it's a lot slower. So it takes a while for it to populate, but under this file drop down, if we go to macros, and then it also gives us our list of available macros. In this case, it doesn't separate them up into the different GMS modules that they are, so you just have to go looking for it. So if we go down here to test modules and select small, and then we can come over and tell it, what our button should be. So if we just say select small, and if we want to do a shortcut key, and I've done this in the past where I just do kind of the less than symbol because they're smaller than everything else, so that's shift and then a comma. And if I assign that to select small, then that's going to be my current shortcut key, and you'll see it here. I don't have to create a button for it because I've got a shortcut key, but if I wanted to use a button, I would just click and drag it up onto one of the toolbars. And it's going to give us just this generic tag icon, which is Corel's generic icon for not having an icon. If we wanted to create an icon, we could, and then just browse and go and find the icon that we wanted to add to it, and click OK. This will select 10 inches. Just give it a description and I'll click OK. So if I wanted to create a button for it, now I've got the button for it. And I've also got a keyboard shortcut. So if I had a whole bunch of little pieces that are smaller than 0.09, and they are just kind of scattered throughout my design, or whatever. If I had a bunch of little stuff here, I'll just hit the space bar a bunch of times. Drop a bunch of them. Okay, so when I run that, it will get rid of all those tiny little pieces for me. If I wanted to actually see, it doesn't. Again, it's not really meant to be a full tool that has a bunch of settings and stuff in it. So all it does is it finds things that are less than 0.09 inches and deletes them. It's not going to tell me that they're deleted or anything like that. If I hit Control Z, undo, then I would be able to see all the ones that it had selected, just to see them if I really wanted to, and then I could just hit delete again. But that tells you how many it selected. There's 25 different objects there. So I do use select small every once in a while when drawing. And so if I'm drawing with the artistic media tool, for instance, and drawing a bunch of stuff like this, I don't really know what I'm drawing, but rutabaga or something. If I grab all that and weld it together, sometimes there's going to be little things in here, and I don't really see in this particular case that there is anything wrong. But sometimes when it does the welding, it's gonna maybe overlap tiny little pieces. So maybe this here would be broken apart from the rest of the design or something. I don't know. There are times when crazy little things like this happen. So if I've got that little piece and this little piece, maybe it joined them together like that, which is not necessarily what I want. I don't want a tiny little thing like that. And so if I just break it apart and then run my select small, it goes and deletes those tiny little things. So there's an option for you. All right. Okay. I don't see Brandy and Jay joining, and I've got another meeting after this, so I'm just going to continue to cover a couple other things that they had asked about, and then they can go back and watch the video. Derek, did that help out at all, or answer the question that you had, or did you have more questions in addition to that?
That was primarily it. I was going to make a suggestion for a remove loop tool. I'm extracting a piece to send to you just as an example of what it's doing. I'll send it over email in just a moment.
Okay. While you're doing that, I'm going to just talk about a couple more of these designs here. Okay, so in this particular design, I'm not sure if this was on purpose or on accident, but this is all combined together, and we've got overlapping pieces. So I'd assume what they were, there was a gap there, and then they were just doing an auto close, which would have closed that loop in. So that's my assumption. But if we break this apart so that everything is now separated, and this is how I would do it so that these are separate objects, I would go ahead and delete this line here and this line over here. And I'm just clicking on the segment itself to get it to delete. And then I would take these nodes and join them together. Because they're just a straight line, if I just grab them and hit J, it's going to join them, and then I can delete those and not worry about it. I could use join curves over here as well, which isn't a bad idea, but oftentimes I'll just grab the ones that I know I want and join them together, and delete those. So now that I've got those separated from each other, if I select these pieces and hit F to fill grayscale, be able to make this come up. And let's see, this one is not filling, so let's see what's going on with it. All right.
Hi, Cameron.
Hey, how's it going?
Are we late?
Yeah, I was sorry. I don't know if time zones mixed you up or not, but we started earlier than normal.
Did you start at 10 our time?
Yes.
Oh, shoot. Crap.
That's okay. It's recorded, it's all right. So I'm gonna just look at this really quick to see what's going on, why this won't close. It says it's a closed curve. Maybe there are duplicates. Let's take a look.
Hello. That's the way it goes. That's the way this day is going anyway.
All right, so maybe it has to do with fill binding. Let's see what we got here.
Okay, that file's been sent to you.
Okay, awesome. Give me just a second here. I don't know why that didn't want to fill before, but it's filling now. So that's kind of what I would do for that is, separate this from the rest of it. And again, so I know you guys are late, Brandy and Jay. You had asked about layers. This particular design doesn't have different layers on it, so I would just keep it the way that it is. It's good to go. But all I did was I separated those lines. Oh, we got a double. I should have grabbed these and done a fill grayscale. So I just separated those so that I could continue those lines across. This one here, get back to this one here. This one did have multiple layers. This one has multiple layers. So where it says object 2 and object 1, even though they're called objects, that's just giving it a layer name. Technically, they're still layers. And I, in my workflow, do not use layers very often because it complicates things. So if it were me, I would come up and hold Control and click on this button, which will then merge all those layers to a single layer, so that I'm only working on one layer. And then I would work from there. It's not going to hurt anything per se to be working on multiple layers, but it does get more complicated. So that's really on those ones. All I would do differently than the way that you've got them is to maybe separate out the objects and merge the layers. There was one, I'm going to pull up one of these. Okay, this one here, I mean, it's a great design, and you don't necessarily have to change anything on it, but just as a suggestion, I was thinking, one, merge the layers. So I would hold Control and click on objects to layers, which is going to merge them. But these pieces here behind the angel and behind there, if it were me, I'd probably knock these out. So I would knock it out there and knock it out like that. I just think it gives it a little bit more definition to your clouds, and I don't know, I think it looks cooler. So if it were me, I'd do that. Production wise, it's a little more difficult to keep some of that stuff polished, but I think it looks nicer. If I didn't want to do polish, if I wanted to do a halftone, somewhere between frost and polish, then I would usually come in and use, well, there's two different things. You can smart fill, where you're coming in and smart filling these. The downside to using smart fill is that it's creating duplicate objects, right? So I'm going to grab all of these, combine them together, make them white, and then I would apply a transparency to that. And so that way it's going to be somewhere between polish and frost, but not exactly either of those. So then when I go and fill it, it's going to look slightly different.
Now, are you talking about like skimming it?
People call it bluing or honing or whatever, where you're using either different sand or different pressure in order to make it not as frosted as the rest of the pieces.
Okay.
Again, production wise, it takes more time and effort to do something like that, but it does give you, a little differentiation between your polish, your frost, and this section of it.
Okay.
But really, I mean, looking at your designs, they all look really nice. We covered this at the beginning of the video. On something like this, I would normally pull these designs apart from the rest of it so that I can reuse it or move pieces easier than if it were already combined to the panel. But really, that's all I changed there. And merging the layers. So I apologize for getting the time mixed up. You'll have to go back and watch the beginning of the video on there. I've only got a few minutes left before I've got my next meeting. So I'm going to look at this email from Derek real quick and see if we can, what's going on.
Thank you so much, Cameron.
No problem. Okay, so we're opening this up. Okay. All right, Derek, I got this open, and you said there's loops like this. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. Where this curve is overlapping itself.
Yes, and for some reason, even though it's so small, it's causing a problem. Try running the contour.
Yeah, contour definitely does not like stuff like this.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so if contour isn't working, if I'm taking contour and trying to go 0.09 to the outside or something, if it's not working, it's working on some stuff, but not all, right?
Right.
So that's where you can tell that there's a problem. Yeah, I agree with you. It can be kind of tricky to find where exactly that issue lies, especially when it's so small. I mean, if we zoom into this, it's 12,000% before we see where the error is. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just grab my smooth tool and I'll just kind of come along and smooth some of these edges and go around them until it actually fixes it. So as soon as I get the problem fixed, then it will contour. So if it's doing something odd like that, that's normally what I'll do is I'll just grab my smooth and move my way around until it closes in the way that I want it to be done. Not maybe the best way of doing it, but that's my workflow. I don't really run into it a lot, so that's why I've never really built anything to fix it. And whether or not programmatically you can tell a loop, a curve loops on itself, I'm not sure. I'd have to research that and see. Another option is if you are able to see it, if you zoom in enough and you want to be able to fix that quicker, again, you can use smooth, which is one option. So if I just come in here and smooth this, you'll see it ends up eventually getting rid of that loop. Or I could use virtual segment delete and just delete that and then join it there. But because of the way that curve is, it still might not like it. I don't know. Let's try. Yeah, it still doesn't seem to really like it very much.
I usually use the virtual segment tool. The problem is just how long it takes to find it.
Yeah. So here's another one here. You can see it there. There's another loop right there. If I make the loop big enough. But yeah, I don't know. That's usually my workflow, is to just smooth this out and make that so that it's a little bit smoother. I hate to kick you guys out, but I do have another meeting scheduled right now I have to get to. So that's gonna have to be enough for today. And we will be back next Wednesday Again, it's an hour earlier than it has been in the past, so it'll be 9 o'clock Mountain or 10 Central. So,
Okay, Cameron,
yep,
one of the videos from the past April 1st.
Yeah, he fixed it. It's
Oh,
fixed.
okay. All right, never mind. Thank
Problem.
you.
no problem. And there's a few of the past ones I still have to upload. I just have to do some editing on those because I had typed in passwords and stuff. So I gotta edit those before I can upload them. But as soon as I get them uploaded, I'll let you know.
Okay,
Thanks for joining. We will talk to you later.
thank you.
Thanks, Cam.
Dang it.